if you're very, very lucky and very, very good, this Friday, you'll see a special performance by the Soweto Gospel Choir on News Breakfast a bit later on. It is worth hanging out for, trust us.
You do not want to miss it. Let's have a look at what's making news in print and online this morning, and we're joined by rural podcaster and journalism PhD candidate Kirsten Diprose. Kirsten, good morning to you.
Good morning, Lisa.
So do we get to call you doctor soon once you get your PhD?
Well, yes, I suppose, Michael, you will. It's I'm a few years away yet, but I think Kirsten's just fine.
Oh, that's fine.
We will make a fuss and celebrate it with you because I know there's a whole lot of work involved, so good on you for tackling it. Hey, you're also taking a broad look at how the papers and online are treating the Voice referendum a day out from the vote.
That's right. So I suppose unsurprisingly, we've got the papers covered by The Voice, given it's the last day of full campaigning. Interestingly, the Murdoch newspapers, most of them have led with a poll that suggests Australians don't really care about The Voice. So in the Herald Sun, it's got Voice in the Wilderness as the headline. The Courier Mail has Voice care factor nil. Last gasp for the vote, according to the Daily Telegraph. And this story is based on a poll that was conducted for News Corp done by GIC that says that voters would that rank the referendum as the 17th most important issue, so that voters say that they're far more concerned by the cost of living, by health, by employment and education issues. And it also found that the no vote was ahead 45 to 38. And also found that corporate endorsements from brands like Qantas and Woolworths and Telstra didn't actually support the yes vote, even though they came out supporting the yes vote, saying that 2/3 of voters felt that the companies should not take a side, and 1 in 4 actually turn them off the brand. And look, Herald Sun has also put out an editorial. It's not on their front page of the paper, but they're firmly in the no camp, or they sort of phrase it as rejecting the yes campaign. But then if we look at some of the other papers, we see a different story. So the Canberra Times has got quite a different front page. It's got a large yes. It's not so much of an editorial. It's got why we say yes, and it's really looking at some of Canberra's leading Indigenous leaders on why they say yes and why they support the referendum. Then we've got, papers like The Age, owned by Nine, that have really come out strongly. On the front page, it has their editorial position, which is a firm yes, and their rationale is basically that it's in line with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples that 15 years ago Australia signed, and really goes back into history of saying, back in 1967 there was overwhelming support to recognise Indigenous peoples as part of the Australian population, and really sort of seeing it in that historic light. So it's an interesting sort of time of where the papers are coming out on this. The West Australian, which is owned by Seven West Media, has gone for a more neutral tone. The entire paper is taken up by The Voice, but they've sort of got the yes leaders down one side, the no leaders down the other, and they're looking at both sides on this final day of campaigning.
Now let's go to our homepage and picking up on a point made by Nicole Hegarty from Canberra earlier this hour. Anne Toomey, one of this country's most foremost constitutional experts, believes if the referendum goes down, Kirsten, it could be the last referendum Australia holds. A very interesting point of view.
Really interesting point of view by Anne Toomey, who is a leading constitutional expert. She's a professor at the University of Sydney and was actually one of the members on the constitutional expert group that helped inform the government on the referendum proposal. But like you said, she said this could be the last one that we had, that we have. And points to the sort of climate that we see. She sort of says that certainly bipartisan support seems to be needed. Perhaps if you have bipartisan support, then maybe a referendum would be more likely to happen. But this, Voice referendum will be the 45th attempt at changing Australia's constitution. And of course, only 8 of those have ever actually succeeded. The last referendum we had was in 1999, and which means most Australians, or many Australians, wouldn't have actually voted in a referendum, including myself. I was a teenager and couldn't vote in the last one, which was about whether or not Australia becomes a republic. And the second question was about inserting a preamble into the Constitution recognising Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first peoples of Australia. It, of course, didn't succeed. And what I think is really interesting that Anne Twomey said is that she sees this as being very linked to having implications for whether or not there is referendum again for a republic. She said, in her view, that the no campaign for this referendum will have implications for the republic referendum, that side of politics has been strategically knocking out this referendum for the voice in the hope that it will knock out chances for a second referendum on the republic. And she also spoke about social media, and of course that's a very different time to 1999, whereas now there's a lot of stuff that happens on social media that, you know, she said it just wouldn't be published on mainstream media. So people are getting their information from all different sources, and some of that is not very accurate.
Let's turn finally to wheat yields. They're above, and they're on track to be above the median price. What's going on? What does it mean for people watching this morning?
Yes, so this is a bit of a forecasting tool. It's kind of like looking at the Bureau of Meteorology, but for wheat. And it's called the Wheatcast tool. It's by the CSIRO, and I love a farm story, but it's a little bit of good news that I'm hoping to share, because despite the ongoing dry conditions, and we've got predicted El Nino, this CSIRO tool is forecasting that wheat yields across the country will be above the long-term median. So the average is 1.88 tonnes a hectare, is what it's predicting, which is 3% above the 15-year national average of 1.82 tonnes a hectare. But I have to say, with that, the crops are looking, or at least are predicted to be better in the southern parts of the country, particularly Victoria, New South Wales and South Australia. So they're likely to exceed the long-term means, while in WA and Queensland it's not expected they will. Now, we already know it's very dry in many parts of the country on both sides of the continent, particularly northern New South Wales, Queensland, and harvest has already begun in Queensland, and it basically rolls down from the north right down to the south. And I'm in the south, so we don't start harvesting our crops till usually December or January. And I can say that the crops look good here, so fingers crossed for the wheat, and many mixed farmers like ourselves will be looking to crops to kind of save us, given that the price of cattle and sheep are not looking so good at the moment.
That's something we might take up with you next time we speak, actually, Kirsten. Great to have you on the program. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Michael.
Soon to be Dr. Diprose. I like the sound of that.